So I graduated from a coding boot camp back in March of 2017 and then went on to work as a web developer for several years. Over that time, I have really improved my skill when it comes to actually getting code over the finish line, actually building out features or building out API endpoints, building out front-end components that are used on a website, or building an API endpoint that is hit several times per second. I have built that proficiency, and I think a lot of coding bootcamp grads, we get really good at shipping product code, at actually getting code out the door. But a lot of us are weak when it comes to computer science fundamentals. When it comes to understanding things like data structures and algorithms, or operating systems, what's actually happening in the machine, how does the machine actually execute code, or networking, or common design patterns. I know I have a lot of room to grow in these areas. And specifically, one of the areas that I think is really important is data structures and algorithms. I've noticed that after doing about 40 LeetCode questions, I'm starting to really grasp concepts like runtime and space complexity. A given algorithm is trying to solve something, and it might perform really well if its input is small. Maybe it only has a input of 5 items and it has to process 5 items. But how does it perform when its input is 1 million items? That's what runtime and space complexity measure. Runtime complexity, does it take a lot longer to perform its operations when it has 1 million things versus 5? Probably, but how much longer is what runtime complexity measures? How much more space does the algorithm take up when it has to process 1 million items versus 5? Runtime, space complexity, they help us measure these things. I'm not going to go too much farther in the weeds on what I've learned, but I'm realizing that doing these LeetCode questions builds these concepts. So doing these LeetCode questions gets you better at understanding how to write code that performs well under scale, which is really important in the workforce. And as I'm doing more of these LeetCode questions, I'm realizing that I am able to contribute a lot more in technical discussions at work. And then, of course, working in tech, we all know that what's the motto that a lot of tech companies have? They're slow to hire, fast to fire. So everybody who works in tech as an engineer knows that their job could just vanish at any time. I know that. And so doing more LeetCode questions builds up your skill to pass these technical interviews. A given technical interview is going to have probably a LeetCode section where you're going to have to solve some sort of algorithm, and also a system design where you're going to have to design a system or a piece of a system, talk through your process. There might be more there. At least whenever I've interviewed, those have been the 2 technical portions. Maybe at times back in the day, when I was a React developer, when I was applying for React developer jobs, they asked me some React questions. But the consistent things that are there are going to be LeetCode questions and system design. So doing these LeetCode questions, if you're looking for jobs, obviously it's important. But even if you're not looking for jobs, I think it's a really good way to build those fundamentals and raise your skill set as an engineer, especially if you're a coding bootcamp grad. There's so many skills to being an engineer. There's communication, there's actually the act of getting things done, of getting product code out the door. And then there's actually understanding computer science fundamentals. And I believe that these what's the word I'm looking for? This generative AI, as we have code, as we have these tools, these AI tools that write most of the code for us, having a strong understanding of how to write performant code is going to be really important, because this tool might generate some code that maybe it works, but how is it going to scale? And if you don't have the fundamentals, you're not going to be able to ask it the right questions to get your code to be performant. So anyway, I really am seeing the value in LeetCode, because I'm realizing that even after just only solving 40 questions, I'm growing as a software engineer, and I'm also gaining confidence where I'm realizing, okay, if something happens to my job, I know that I'm building the skills to be able to go get another one. So it is tough to make time, especially with a demanding full-time job. It is tough to make time to do LeetCode. And so that is something I am working through, and I'm going to make another video because I think I've found a system that's going to help me get LeetCode, make LeetCode progress, even while having a full-time job. But anyhow, I just want to share this video that LeetCode is really important. And if you are a software engineer, I do think it's worth investing time into it. So at least that's what I'm doing, and I'm excited to see where it takes me. So I hope you liked the video. If you did, leave me a thumbs up, and I'll talk to you all on the next one.